Welcome to the Clarity Advisor Show, where you'll learn how to grow your team today. Join Ken Trupke and his guests as they discuss what works and doesn't work to grow your team in today's world. And now, your host, Ken Trupke.
Hello, and welcome to the Clarity Advisor Show. If you're a leader who struggles to get the results you need from your team, but you're uncomfortable having conversations around accountability or consequences, well, today's show might help you see it in a different way. My guest is Hamish Knox of the Sandler training. And Hamish has written a book on accountability and has a framework that he'll share with us today about how to make accountability a positive thing that helps you and your team achieve your goals and their individual goals. So here to talk about accountability, welcome Hamish Knox. Hamish, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's talk about Sandler. Who do you serve and what problem do you solve?
Yeah, it's a really great question and slightly complicated because most people think of Sandler and they think of sales training. We were the Sandler Sales Institute for the longest time. So great. Ultimately, Sandler is two buckets. Number one bucket is supporting our individual learners have more effective human-to-human interactions professionally and personally, leveraging the Sandler communication system. Bucket two is sustainably scaling the sales for our clients. So those are really the two big buckets. The second one is organizational. The first one is personal. So we are really industry agnostic. As long as there are two human beings interacting, we can provide some kind of support and guidance. Typically where we are spending our time is on the revenue generating side of the business, everything from getting the best people on the team to getting the best out of them to having more effective interactions with buyers, from hi, nice to meet you to looking forward to working with you and everything beyond from there.
So what was the expansion from just sales to the broader thing? What was behind that? What need were you seeing in the marketplace that created that change?
Ultimately, I believe it was our clients who came to us and said, you do realize, like, I have a better relationship with my spouse because of the work we're doing with you. And we would say, no, I had no idea because I'm not in your living room. So tell me more. And they would say, yeah, doing this. And of course, entrepreneurs going, oh, okay, well, if we have this thing that's working over here and it seems to be working over here, could it really be working over here? And that's ultimately why I described it as a communication system and not a sales system, because ultimately we have a book called From the Boardroom to the Living Room. Some of our clients call it From the Boardroom to the Bedroom, which is all about taking Sandler quote unquote sales techniques and applying them in everyday human to human interactions.
Yeah. And that makes perfect sense. We've talked about it with a lot of guests on the show that sales is helping people get what they couldn't get without your help. So it's all about helping people and serving people and communicating effectively to do that. And so that's everywhere. We want to be effective communicators everywhere. So yeah, why wouldn't training in sales and communication and improvement there translate into all other relationships? So, and that makes perfect sense. And I love that you guys saw the need and then broadened the scope of what you provided.
Yeah, it's one of those things where we tell people sales equals communication, communication equals sales, but no one ever says tells their child they want them to be a salesperson when they grow up, right? So sales is still a dirty word. And like, I have two daughters who are 12 and 9 right now. I've never said to either of them that I want you to be in sales when you grow up. I have said entrepreneur, which is code for salesperson, and they'll figure that one out later. But still to this day, so when we're talking about, and then also when we talk about communications training, it's like, oh, that's something HR does. That's like that soft skill stuff. So it's not really seen as a real business need. However, as we've found, especially post-COVID, communication is our single most powerful driver of real value internally and externally.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, especially since COVID 2020 and moving things virtually, it's even more emphasize the need to have good, effective, authentic communication and being able to help people in those different mediums, because we're not just always across the table from each other now. Yeah. So let's get to know you a little bit. Tell us about your earlier career and what led you into Sandler and how you got where you are now.
Yeah, so I've been in sales since I was 19. I was also a journalist. And so I like to say I went from journalism to what journalists call the dark side, which is marketing and PR. And then I went to the really dark side of sales. And, now I'm just like no light escapes from me, right? As a trainer, as a facilitator. So I worked for a company called Canada Newswire for many years as their big buck hunter, for lack of a better term. I was Fortune 100 companies that were not using our products were my targets, and I was also a SaaS specialist for a media monitoring and crisis management platform at the same company. I worked for a pro lacrosse team called the Calgary Roughnecks, and then ultimately I was in Montreal for meetings because Canada Newswire bought the company that really ran the back engine of this SaaS platform. So we were doing integration meetings, and my last sales manager, who's thanked in my book on accountability, his name is Gord, we randomly decided to have dinner at the same Portuguese restaurant. So I walked in and said, table for one. They said, go sit at the bar, loser, or something in French. I'm not really sure what they said. And Gord was there. And Gord is ex Bell, Rogers, Xerox, IBM, like big companies. He's done lots of training. So he's like, hey man, how's it going? Haven't seen you in a while. And I said, I was talking to Jim, and I was talking to Doug, and I was talking to Dan. And he puts up his hand. He goes, have you ever heard of Sandler? And I go, nope. And he says, well, it's really how you think and talk and act. And I said, thanks, I think. And then that night, couldn't sleep. I did have a sales training company off the side of my desk that wasn't really going anywhere because I was so focused on my role with Canada Newswire. And that night I Googled and I found an article by my former colleague, Bill Bartlett, who retired recently. And it was like I walked into a church and God spoke to me. And I was like, how do I get more of this stuff? So I filled in the form. My now ex gave up a trip to Vegas over Canadian Thanksgiving in 2010 to go to Baltimore in 2010 for what they call Discovery Day, which is so you want to be a Sandler trainer. January 1 of 2011, I signed the papers because I thought it was symbolic. The day I landed in Baltimore for my initial training was the day that bin Laden was killed. And in my first 6 months in Sandler, I made 5,000 cold calls, and I've been moving forward ever since.
Wow, 5,000 cold calls. I love it. Yeah, it's another thing we talk about a lot on the show when we're talking about sales is the phone still works. And it's possibly, I would even suggest, the best way to connect with people because you're looking to have a connection and it's just not there in email or text.
No, God sent a messenger is not a great way to proactively prospect, right? Oh, I sent 5,000 emails today, boss. Oh, great. What kind of response did you get? Well, 4,990 unsubscribes.
Exactly. All right, let's move into accountability. The book you wrote is now coming up on 10 years. Yep, there we go. If you're watching on YouTube, there's the book. So tell us about that book and that 20-minute accountability framework.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way this came to be is I submitted to Sandler like my version of a Peter Drucker, like omnibus sales leader type book. And my editor called me and said, okay, if I accept this, I basically kill our entire book pipeline. However, tell me what this accountability in 20 minutes a week thing is. And so I told him, and he's like, make me one of those. So I'll get to the 20 minutes a week in a second. The first chapter of the book is busting myths of accountability because there's so many myths about accountability. I just did a talk recently for one of my colleagues. I facilitated a session with their sales mastery group on personal accountability. And one of the things I said is most people, when we hear about consequences, because that's a big thing with accountability, right? There's got to be consequences, is that's either push-ups or punishment laps, right? All of us remember being on the sports team and the coach is like, you guys suck today, get running, right? Or you mouthed off to your commander and now you got to do 50 push-ups, whatever it is. The word consequence is actually neutral. And I find consequences are more positive, especially for leaders where we have so many demands on our time. We need to have positive consequences. My clients know I'm cookie operated. So literally my consequence is I get a cookie if I do my activities for the day. So that's a positive consequence. And the first chapter is busting all these myths about like having, it's big brother. I don't want to be big brother, or I've got a veteran team, or it's going to take me too much time. And we can certainly unpack some of those more today if we have time. the 15 minutes a week is very simple. On Monday, we have a 5-minute meeting and we ask 3 key questions of each of our sellers individually. By the way, this is an individual thing. This is not a group thing. So individually, 5 minutes on Monday, every one of our sellers, 3 key questions. And then on Friday, we have a 15-minute meeting, and there's a format we call Recon, which is 5 steps in this format. Leveraging that format, we create complete clarity between us and our team member, which gives us as leaders the freedom to actually go do the work we need to do, as opposed to going, so, hey, Jim, what are you working on today? Hey, Jim, how'd that meeting go? Hey, Jim, what's going on with this? Monday, we set up our week. Friday, we review the week. And the last 2 letters in Recon are actually a bit of a preview of the following week. And that sets up our system. It's not a coaching session, although this is where we or our team member can say, hey, I got this coming up on Wednesday. Can we have a coaching call? Because I need some help in pre-call planning. So that's the summary of what accountability the Sandler way is all about.
Excellent. Yeah. When I want to get into some of those reasons leaders don't implement some kind of accountability. And you touched on a couple of those. The one being, I don't have time. I would think that shrinking it down to 20 minutes would kind of eliminate that objection. Is that what happens?
We had a leader, they were working for a very large publicly traded company, and they had 14 direct reports. So any listeners, or if you're watching on YouTube, if you have more than 14 direct reports, this doesn't apply to you. I've yet to meet another leader who had more than 14 direct reports. So they came to me and said, Hamish, I hear you on the accountability, got it, makes sense. I don't have that much time. And we worked out that to follow this system and to do one 25-minute coaching call every single week with each of their sellers was going to be 4.5 hours a week. Now, total. And, and then, then maybe sales funnel review meetings and all those other things. However, most leaders work, I think, a standard 40-hour work week. Isn't that your experience? Something like that, right? Or not. So 4.5 hours out of a 40-hour work week, I'm bad at math, but that sounds like about 10%, roughly. So to be able to spend 10% of your working hours getting completely clear with each of your team members and supporting them in a coaching session kind of sounds like a good ROI.
Yeah, absolutely. And do people, once they've implemented this, come back to you with the feedback of, this is, like the classic kind of like, why did I do this sooner? This is working great. Or what are people's experience once they've implemented this, from going from this won't work for us, or I have too many people, and all the excuses, to, oh yeah, this is great.
And that's really what it comes down to. So we have a client who is about to announce a very successful exit of their business. And they actually engaged my colleague, Carrie, who heads up our fractional sales management group here at Sandler Calgary, on this process. And Carrie followed this process. And the leader said that, number one, they had more time back in their day, but number two, their sellers were more productive because the sellers were completely focused from Monday. And so for leaders who are implementing this on their own, you're exactly right. It's coming back going, hey man, this is amazing. I have so much more freedom. I have so much more time. My sellers are more self-sufficient. I'm not getting that metaphorical now knock on the door going, hey boss, got a minute? Because everyone is clear from Monday what they're going to do. They know we've got this meeting on Friday that we're going to discuss it. And so now I can actually go work on the business as opposed to getting continually sucked into the business.
Yeah. And my experience is that it's helpful to everybody on the team, that the teammates don't want to be bothered all week with those questions that you mentioned, like where are we at and how's this coming and what's going on with this meeting and how did that go? Like, we don't want to have to respond to all that stuff midweek. And so it not only frees up the leader to put in their 4.5 hours and then let people run for the week, but it lets people run for the week without having to answer the poke questions from the leader wondering what's going on all week.
Exactly. And so then, morale improves, to use a bit of a cliche, right? Because people feel completely trusted by their leader. And there is the expectation set of like, I trust that you're going to deliver on what you say. And if you don't, we will have a conversation about it. And that's there's a whole chapter on consequences in the book. And how do you implement the consequence ladder? Because most leaders, if I'm doing a keynote or something like that on accountability, and I bring up consequences, I've had plenty of people, mic after the talk or come up to me after and be like, well, I don't want to fire the people if they miss their numbers for a week. I'm like, that's really dumb. Like, I did not say that you should do that, but that's where our brain goes, right? Our brain in business goes, consequence equals you're fired. And no, dumb. Please don't do that. That's very, very dumb. Want to encourage all the listeners, do not do that. But we need to set up a ladder, right? So first ladder in a sales context, typically the first step on the ladder is make up your numbers before the end of next week. Pretty simple. And the ladder you have to be able to get off, right? You can't be on double secret probation for the rest of your life, because all that's going to do is put undue pressure on your team member, and they're much more likely to be going to Indeed to be looking for a job as opposed to actually performing, right? So they have to be able to get off the consequence ladder. The other key thing is the leader has to be comfortable executing on the consequence ladder, because eventually the consequence is termination, right? If you completely step offside, you are going to be fired. And oftentimes sellers and team members look at the boss and it's like, oh, they're the parent who's never going to get to 3, right? Like, I know we did this exercise. Okay, this was fun, but they're never going to get to 3. And there's a story in the book about a client in the Midwest United States, and they had their sellers, they were like a high-end retail, and they had their sellers broken into A, B, and C based on weekly sales. So whoever sold the most of the week was an A, B, C, etc. And they implemented this, and the sellers didn't say it, but they were like, okay, yeah, they're never going to get to 3, right? Well, one of the B players went through the consequence ladder in 30 days, which was like a land speed record for going through the consequence ladder, and they were fired. And magically, the rest of the team went, oh, this wasn't an exercise in exercise. They actually mean it. Okay, and actually some of the rest of the team left. It was mostly the C players, because they went, hey, we're not going to be able to pull the wool over the eyes of management anymore. And the rest of the group accelerated their production because they went, hey, I have complete clarity as to what's going to happen if I don't deliver on the commitments I made. Because the leadership was not dictating, thou shalt do A, B, and C every week. They were saying to the sellers, hey, here's your target. How are you going to get there? And you design it, and we're going to hold you accountable to it. And the sellers went, hey, I get to have a voice in this conversation? This is even better. And so because it was their plan that then management approved and said, great, run with this and we'll support you, they didn't have any challenges with turnover or productivity. They had people leave eventually because they got poached because they were crushing it. But they didn't have any of those awkward conversations that I'm sure plenty of the listeners have had about, like, hey, Hamish, it's the 3rd week in the month and you haven't sold anything. What's going on? And we eliminated that by implementing this accountability process.
Oh, so much good stuff in there. First, I just have to acknowledge the comedic effect of the parent who never gets to 3, that it's such a great analogy, because it's totally like 1, 2, 2.5, 2 3/4. And once the team realizes that, then yeah, the C players are going to continue to be slackers, and the A players are going to get demotivated because there's no consequences for not doing your job. So it kind of subconsciously, we all start dropping down and not doing our job. And yeah, it kind of only takes one time to make it serious, like that for firing, like, oh, okay, this is real. And now, yeah, the C players are going to leave because, oh, now we actually have to perform. Maybe this isn't a fit for me anymore. And the A players love it because, great, game on, let's do this. Yeah, I did a show recently about accountability, and the phrase, the question that one of my mentors, Joe Peachy, introduced me to a few years ago, which is the question of, what if they don't? And so leaders now seem like they're unwilling to have an answer to what if they don't. And I think you nailed it with that comfortability question or point, that they're just uncomfortable having that conversation and having to be the parent that gets to 3 so they don't. But hey, if what if they don't is nothing? There's no answer to what if they don't? Well, no. Well, yeah, it's not going to get better on its own.
No, not at all.
So, well, I want to hit on another one of the things that you said. People say that is a reason they don't need to do this, the veteran team. And we'll do that on the other side of the break. So stay with us. We're talking with Hamish Knox of Sandler, and we'll be right back on the Clarity Advisor Show.
Is your business where you want it to be or on track to get there? Clarity Advisors helps business leaders improve communication and get your team aligned and engaged for greater success. We specialize in helping you streamline your sales and operating systems to improve efficiency and grow your profits. Call or text Ken at 616-822-2998 to have a complimentary 12-minute call to see what some clarity could do for you.
Okay, welcome back to the Clarity Advisor Show. Today we're talking with Hamish Knox of Sandler. And Hamish, before the break, we talked about some of the reasons leaders say they don't need to implement accountability. And one of them was they have a veteran team. Tell me about that.
So the veteran team, and I spoke with at a CEO group in Calgary once, and I made this comment about this veteran team, and a leader from a very large industrial construction company put up their hand and they said, that's a really prescient comment, because I can tell you from my experience, literally every veteran person, and by the way, we're not talking about military veterans, we're talking about people with experience, just to clarify that on for listeners. Every person we've brought in who's got, years or decades of experience, they come in and go, I'm going to do things my way. You hired me because I'm awesome, and we're going to do things my way. And the fact of the matter is that in order for us to successfully scale, everybody needs to be following the same program. And so when a leader says, oh, Hamish, I got a veteran team, I'll say, awesome. So how are they all rowing in the same direction with you? And the leader usually says, I don't know what you're talking about. They're a veteran team. They know what to do. Well, you and I have had that experience where we are talking to a friend or spouse, partner, child, whatever, team member, and we're thinking, you should know this. And they don't. And that is where the leader fails to create the clarity from day one of, Hamish, we're bringing you on board because you have great experience, or because you have a great contact list, or because whatever. You need to understand that this is what we do here in terms of accountability and making sure that we're all rowing in the same direction, because the veterans, and even if you're implementing this as a team and you've got more juniors and you've got more veteran type team members, the veterans will often say, oh, that's great for the newbies. That's awesome. Love it. Yeah, I get it, because they don't know, where to find the bathroom or how to fill in the forms or whatever. But I'm awesome because I've been here for years. And you're like, yes, you've been here for years. We love you. And this is what's going to happen. One of my colleagues says the quickest way to kill any initiative is to say we're going to try something, because that's code for this too shall pass. It does not matter what we say. It matters what they hear. And when we as leaders say we're going to try this, our team hears, oh, Hamish went to a conference. He heard Jim talk and he got all pumped and excited. And in 30 to 45 days, he'll be on to the next new thing. So we're just going to pay lip service, go along with it. And then it's going to vanish when Hamish comes up with the next magic thing that he wants to try out. So when we're implementing accountability, it's we're doing this, not we're trying this. And especially with veterans, they need to understand that this is the way that life works in this organization now. And if you would choose to be more successful elsewhere, very happy for you to go do that. And I have a book on called Change the Sandler Way, which is my second book, which talks about implementation of any change initiative and how you have to be prepared for turnover. Because if you implement accountability leaders, you are going to have turnover. And it may be some of the people that you think are rock stars right now who, as I said earlier, all of a sudden go, oh, I actually have to report on these things. I don't want to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Here we do things this way is a very powerful phrase that my clients get sick of hearing me say, that they should say to their teams. Like, here we do things this way. I get it. you used to do something a different way at your old place, or you have your own way of doing things, but here we do things this way, because you can't scale when everyone's doing their own thing. When Bob does Bob and Sue does Sue, well, that's not trainable, that's not repeatable, that's not scalable. And so we're not going to build a team that has velocity and can continually put up numbers by everybody kind of doing their own thing. And so, yeah, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to try it. We're going to do it. And if that doesn't work for you, as successful as you've been here, we will miss you.
Yeah.
So how do you coach and advise the people you work with to implement this? Is it, do we just start with everybody, or do we start with a small team and try to grow it? Or what's been your best experience on that?
So the best thing to do, a phrase that my clients get sick of hearing is lead dog sets the pace. So the first thing that I say to a leader is you got to do it, right? You've got to be accountable. You've got to demonstrate. One of my colleagues had a client, it was a VP, there was a telecom company, VP of sales, had 300 people on their team at all the various levels, right? From the right front lines all the way up to the leaders who reported to them. This VP would post their personal goals on the company intranet every quarter, and they would give permission to anybody to hold them accountable. And they were a road cyclist. And so, as anyone who knows about road cycling, you got to put in the miles every week on the bike. So my colleague told me this story, and I put it in the book, that this VP was trying to sneak out a little bit early one day, right? They hadn't quite checked all their boxes for the week, but they need to get a ride in. So they're wheeling their bike out, and the receptionist said, "Hey, have a good ride. Out of curiosity, did you hit your goals for the week?" Now, by the way, yeah, some of the listeners, clenched a little when I told this story, because this is an inflection point where that VP could be like, "Awesome, please pack your stuff and get the hell out of here," right? Like that is on the spectrum of possibilities. And instead they turned around and said, "You know what? I'm so glad you asked me that. I was trying to sneak out. I'm going to go get that done." They went back. It was 20 minutes. It took them 20 minutes to check off the couple of boxes. They rolled out and they said, "Thank you." And again, that became a story. That became a cultural moment in that company where the leader allowed themselves to be held accountable by someone who, A, wasn't on their team, and B, was like right at the very front door of this office, right? They're kind of the lowest person in the hierarchy, and the leader gave them permission to hold them accountable. And so that really resonated. The number one thing, though, especially if you're rolling this out with a sales team, is to collect data for 30 days. If we don't have data to build an accountability program with, we're really just flying by the seat of our pants, or we're going with our gut, and that's a horrible way for accountability. Accountability needs real data, real clarity, and real consequences. So what I'll say to a leader is, Jim, go to your people, give them this worksheet, and say, "I want you to track all of the proactive activities that you do for the next 30 days. That's a networking event, that's asking for an introduction, that's making a prospecting call, that's having a discovery meeting," like whatever it is. And then at the end of 30 days, we take that data set and we say, okay, did each person do the right things to move them closer to their targets? That's question one. Did I do the right things? Question number two is, did I do enough of the right things? Because I like cold calls. I don't necessarily like networking. I've had team members who love networking and don't like cold calls. So the point is to get to the mountaintop, which is hit your sales target, right? That's the point. Like, how each person gets there is their own individual way. However, I needed to add some networking into my activities, because networking is a very powerful way of filling your funnel. So question two again is, did I do enough of the right activities? And then question number three is, am I doing the right activities right? And this is a coaching moment, because if we look at the ratios between, if it takes me 20 prospecting attempts to have one conversation with the decision maker, well, is that okay? Or could it be 15? Could it be 10? There's coaching opportunities in those ratios. So as we continue to build a data set and roll forward with targets, now we have real coaching opportunities for our team, as opposed to, Hamish, my tummy thinks that you're not doing very well this week. And I'll tell you, our tummy is not a good way of judging performance or a candidate's suitability to be on our team. I want real data. And then what we do is we put the pressure on the data, not the person. So when we're looking at the data, it's, hey, Hamish, your numbers are a little off, not, hey, Hamish, you're a screw up as a salesperson.
Yeah, absolutely. We're trying to solve the problem, and the problem is in the process or the activities. It's not the person per se. And to be able to separate those two, people can still hear it probably as criticism, but the more we can try to focus it on, look, it's about your activities and about your outcomes, not about you.
And something I want to caution, because I've had a couple of conversations with leaders, there are extremes, right? There is the extreme of thou shalt make X number of dials, X number of email, right? And like, oh, you were off by one, therefore you failed. This is part of a whole human-focused program to support our team members. Accountability is not supposed to be a stick or handcuffs. It is meant to be a support tool for both us and our team members to get us to where we want to go as an organization.
Yeah, absolutely. We're trying to put these things in place to help people perform. And people come to work to do a good job. They want to succeed. They're there to do the right things, like you said, the right way, and enough of the times to get where we're trying to go as a result. So it's that those activities at rate get us to the results. And the accountability model that you've talked about, and the consequence ladder and all these things are meant to help us, to free us up to get there, not meant to be a punishment, but it can be so tricky. In fact, what are some of your ideas as to how we get people away from the negativity of consequences? Just that hearing that word triggers negative mindsets and thoughts. And how do we transition it to like, no, this is actually a tool that's going to help you. And because on the other side, people love it, but nobody knows that going in. So how do we help people get there?
So the number one thing is, we coach all the leaders that we support to understand the personal goals of every single member on their team. So a recurring mantra that I deliver to my leaders, again, they're probably sick of the leaders that I work with, they're probably sick of hearing about it, is a quota is not a goal, but it's a gift. So when you say, Hamish, here's your quota, here's your number for the year, that's a gift because that tells me what I need to do to stay employed. Right? Like that's the gift that you're giving me. However, it's not a goal because it comes from outside. It's imposed on me. And our people do not work for us because they love us or our company. They work for us because they believe working for us gets them to their personal goals faster. So the leaders that we work with who have made the time to share their personal goals, vulnerability is our greatest source of strength as a leader, and understand each individual's personal goals. Now that's the ultimate consequence. Hey, Hamish, I know you said you wanted to get a down payment for, your first home this year. Based on the pace you're at, you ain't going to get there. So how do we get you back on pace? That's the ultimate consequence is I don't get what I've told you I want personally. In terms of setting up the consequence ladder, involve the team with it. This is the key thing is our experience in our lives has typically been consequences are imposed on us, right? Like you're grounded for a week or go to bed without supper or you got to work weekends or again, fill in the blank. But all the listeners are like thinking of their own version that's been imposed on them. So when we pull our sellers together, and I'm going to use a sales example and say, all right, we need to have some consequences as part of this accountability. There cannot be accountability without consequences. And we're going to do this together so there's clarity from day one and alignment from day one. And so one of the workshops that I facilitated on this, one of the sellers started off with, well, just fire us. And the leader, because I'd given them a little bit of coaching beforehand, I said to that seller, thanks for saying that. If you were me, would you really fire you because you just happened to miss your target for a week? And they went, no. And he said, great. So what we're going to start with is make up your numbers before the next week based on the data that we just talked about. And everyone went, oh, so it's like a little thing. It's a little step up. And then it was a lovely conversation that the leader had with their sellers. I was there to ask a couple of questions and guide, but ultimately they came together, they built their plan, and then there was clarity from day one. And so again, everybody was following the plan. I appreciate in organizations that maybe have a fairly contentious relationship, like there's certainly in unionized environments, and there's the thing going on in the ports right now. Like this might be a bit of more of an awkward conversation, at least up front. However, when it is presented by the leader as being a support tool, as like the thing I never want to have to use, then the team members go, oh, okay, so number one, we get to be involved. Number two, this is for our information only. It's not something that they're going to use it as a punitive measure. And then, of course, the thing that we talked about earlier in the episode is if somebody decides to test us, then we actually have to have the commitment and the conviction to execute the consequence ladder and share with the team that we are doing it. Now, we don't have to share all the details, obviously, and in some cases we might not be allowed to. However, our team has to know that we are actually implementing the consequence ladder on this member of the team who is deciding to not follow the accountability program that they helped build.
Yeah, you got to make sure at some point that you make clear that you're the parent that actually doesn't get to 3. That if we have to get to 3, I don't want to. And this is all for in service of you, team member, that we're helping you get your goals personally. But if I have to, I'll get to 3, because we can't let it spread the cancer to the rest of the team. And it's not good for you, and you're not going to hit your goals either, and everybody's going to be unhappy. So yeah, I want to come back to one thing that you mentioned when you talked about that lead dog sets the pace, which I think my clients are going to get tired of me saying that, because I love that. I'm totally going to adopt that. But the humility, what hit me was the humility of that leader walking out the door with his bike to allow the receptionist to call him out. And instead of going off on her, like you said, was clearly on the spectrum of possibility, but rather to accept that rebuke and go back and do the work and accept that he had been called out, that he had said, go ahead and call me out. And then when he was called out, he accepted it. And just the humility of that as a leader is so powerful. I can just imagine the repercussions through the organization that story has, and the power that it has, and the example it sets for the other leaders.
100%. I did a talk at the 2024 Sandler Summit in Orlando on intentionally designing a sales culture. And the key message was our culture is the behavior that is approved implicitly or explicitly. That is it. And I'm sure some of the listeners have had, multi-day culture workshops and all those kinds of things. And I hope they were wonderful. I hope the food was good. And your culture is the behavior approved implicitly or explicitly. That's it. So that leader approved that behavior, right? That was a behavior. And so culturally, that came across as, we are allowed to respectfully hold each other accountable, no matter what level we are in the organization or what it says on our business card. If someone has put their goals out publicly and been brave to do that, they are asking for our support in getting them to where they want to be, so we can hold them accountable.
Yeah, so good. Seth Godin says, people like us do things like this. And it's just that collection of behaviors, what's accepted and what's not. That's truly the culture, regardless of what you say. It's always what you do, not what you say, that carries the most weight. So good. Well, congratulations again on the book. Speaking of books, what else are you consuming these days? What books, podcasts, audiobooks, what have you, that are helping you grow?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I have several podcasts that are appointment listening for me every week. One of them is How I Built This with Guy Raz, interviewing very successful entrepreneurs, mostly B2C, right? So there's a lot of beauty. There's a lot of consumer packaged goods. He did have Herb Kelleher, who was the founder of Southwest Airlines, on once, which was an absolutely incredible show. Herb told the story that at one point, Southwest was the largest liquor distributor in Texas because every flyer got a bottle of bourbon. So I would encourage the audience to check out how I built this. The other one is The Brainy Business, Milena Palmer. She's a behavioral economist, and she's got 3 incredible books. And her podcast every week is interviewing behavioral economists, scientists who are helping us understand all those wonderful foibles that make us human, that also cause us to say and do things that are maybe occasionally not in our best interest. And then also how to transform those into actionable insights for either leaders for supporting their team, or for sellers in having more effective engagements with their buyers. So those would be the 2 that I would highly, highly recommend. I have a 4-book Hall of Fame. I don't think I've ever shared it with anybody on a podcast before, so I'll share it with you and your audience today. So first book is Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi. I read that book back when I was 27, and I thought I had my dream job, and I was like, where do I go from here? And then I read that book and went, oh, I totally understand now. Your Brain at Work by David Rock, which I'm a brain nerd. I'm a neuroscience nerd. I actually have a model of a human brain in my office that I use in training, because it's really, that's how we interact. That's all the weird things that go on. So David Rock uses the brain as a theater play. So he breaks down the brain as like if there's a director and there's an actor and things like that. Really, really cool way of understanding how our brains work. The next book is What Got You Here Might Not Get You There by Marshall Goldsmith. Phenomenal. I read that in my early 20s. The number one thing that I have shared with multiple people is when someone gives you feedback in any form or fashion, the only thing you need to say to them is thank you and move on. You don't need to say thanks and I'll do this, or start, obviously you don't want to disagree, but thank you is a complete sentence when it comes to receiving feedback, whether that was you're the best person in the world, or I thought that would completely suck. And then the last one is Mindset by Carol Dweck, which I just absolutely love. Given the work I do, probably not surprised that Mindset is in my 4-book Hall of Fame. If you haven't heard of Mindset, really what the central thesis is we believe we have a fixed mindset, or we have a growth mindset or a flexible mindset. What this also illustrated for me, and there's a book, an article in Psychology Today called The Trouble with Smart Girls, and it tracked girls' participation in math. And developmentally, girls tend to go faster than boys in elementary school. But in grade 9, girls' participation in math in the United States plummets. It's like it falls off a cliff. And so the researchers went, well, why is that? And what they discovered is boys are typically praised for effort, right? Jim, you worked real hard on the football field today. And girls are told they have innate abilities. You're smart, you're pretty, you're athletic, whatever. And so part of this book on mindset that Carol Dweck wrote is, if you are only told that you were a thing for your whole life, you will do whatever it takes to maintain that worldview. So if you are told from the time that you're small, you're really smart at math, you're really smart at math, and then we get to grade 9 and we're like, oh, what's this algebra? What's this quadratic equation? I don't feel smart anymore. I'm going to run back to where I feel smart, which is remedial math. That's where the plummet happens. So with my 2 daughters, I have always praised them for their effort, as opposed to telling them they have innate abilities, because I don't want them to get trapped in this mindset of whatever the thing I said to them was, and then they don't actually become the people that they could be because I unintentionally narrowed their worldview.
Yeah, that book is an absolute game changer. I remember the first time I read it and realized how I had fallen into a fixed mindset and what things had led up to that. And then also how I was parenting. And so it definitely opens your eyes when you realize, oh yeah, I can see how that ties together. And then, yeah, there's studies and data and things in that book to explain some of this stuff. And yeah, there's such a huge difference. And the good news is you can do it. It's a skill that you can learn. You're not born with one or the other. It's something that's more environmental and conditioned. And so you can get out of it. You can create your own growth mindset if that's what you choose to do. So, and those are great books. I'm so excited. We'll get those in the show notes. We'll have your book in the show note. So Hamish, this has been fantastic. I so appreciate you taking time to share everything that you walked us through here. what would be, who should reach out to you, and what would be the best way for them to do that?
Great question. So ultimately, as I mentioned at the start of the show, we are really industry agnostic, right? If there's two human beings interacting. So ultimately, I am seeking to speak with entrepreneurs, executives who desire to sustainably scale their sales. They've got at least a 7-figure annual growth that they can see, but they're not sure how to get there. They believe it. They can see that it's going to happen. They're just not really sure how to bridge that gap. They would be best to reach out to me. There are not many Hamishes in North America. I'm pretty easy to find. So if you Google Hamish Sandler or Hamish Calgary, I'm going to pop up. You can certainly find me on LinkedIn. And that would be the best way to reach out. Reach out to hamish@sandler.com is my direct email address, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Just mention that you heard me on the Clarity Advisors show, so I know where you're coming from. And then ultimately we're going to have a conversation and figure out if we're a good fit to work together. We may not be. And what I tell all of my potential clients is, it doesn't mean that I don't love you. It just means that we're not working together right now.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great mindset and a way to approach it. I love that. So I appreciate that. I love that you're also with the Hamish, you're moving into that Beyonce share kind of one word identification.
Well, yeah, I think I was the last person in the Sandler network to be allowed to have a one name email address. So it's very, very easy to find. And most people know me just by my first name, which usually gets mangled. Thanks for saying it properly today. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, and again, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time today. And it was great. I'm going to listen to it over and over because there's a lot of notes I took, and I'm going to take even more. It's just so much in there. So thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Okay, and that wraps up another Clarity Advisors show. Thank you so much for joining us. If you could be so kind as to refer a friend, send this to them and encourage them to listen. That would really help the show. And we'll see you next time on the Clarity Advisors show.
Thank you for listening to the Clarity Advisors show. Clarity Advisors is a speaking, training, and consulting firm specializing in helping you simplify your sales and operating systems to improve efficiency and grow your profits. Connect with Clarity Advisors today to learn more about how they can help you improve communication and get your team aligned and engaged for greater success.